All right, this meeting will come to order. Hello, my name is Linda Paul. I'm president of the Hawaii Audobon Society, and welcome to our very first virtual annual meeting. We hope that next year we will all see you in person, but this year we are all making do with the restrictions of COVID and trying to stay safe. We have with us on your screen today the board of the Hawaii Audubon Society, and I'd like to introduce John Harrison. Wave your hand, John.
Aloha.
And Susan Scott.
Hello.
And Wendy Kunst. And Rich Downs.
Hi.
Pat Moriyasu. Yvonne Chan. Alice Roberts.
Hi.
And Elizabeth Maynard. We also have on your screen Suzanne Spiesberger, who is our El Payo editor.
Hi, hello.
And Wendy Johnson, our executive director, has chose to not look. Anyway, the Audubon Society, for those of you who are not members, was formed in someone's living room something like 39 years ago.
81.
No. Oh, 1939. You're right.
1939.
81 years ago. And we would like to tell you just up front, if at any time you have any questions, just hit the chat button of your screen. Is that correct, Wendy? And type in your question, and we will get back to you with the answers to those questions as best we can do that, probably towards the end of the meeting. To kick things off, I'd like to announce our best and biggest announcement, which is that after many years, the 7th edition of Hawaiiʻs Birds has been completed, and it will be available for purchase December 7th, we hope. But you may pre-order now on our website. The cost is $15 plus $3 shipping about. And we hope you will all gift this beautiful book to your friends. The second part of our program this evening, we'll be talking about the book and how it came to be. And we will meet some of the photographers that contributed to the book and share with you some very beautiful photographs. I would also like to invite all of you to join our Christmas bird count this year. And even though we are in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, the Christmas bird count is going to continue. This is a long-standing citizen science project that was initiated about 1900 as an alternative to going out at Christmas time and shooting birds and competing to see who could shoot the most of them. Anyway, it is, I think it is the longest citizen science project in the United States. The same bird circles are counted every year, and it produces a data set that lets conservationists and managers know whether birds are declining, what species are doing better, which ones are not, the trends that are involved, and it's very useful for land management. And we in Hawaii have some long-standing circles as well. And if you're interested in participating on this, the website will have more information. Our coordinator is Colleen Soares. She unfortunately couldn't be with us here tonight because she's in the process of moving, but she will assign you a circle. And the object of the count is that everyone who is assigned to a particular circle goes out on one day and counts every bird they see and every species. And if you see a species more than once, you count it more than once. Anyway, we hope you will all participate in the Christmas bird count. The results for Hawaii will be published in the El Payo at a later date this year. What else do I have? We have 3 other citizen science projects. Some of you may be aware of them. They're later on in the program. The coordinators of these projects will tell you more about them. But we have, of course, our Seabird Preserve, and Wendy Johnson and Alice will talk about that. we have the Kolea Count, and Susan Scott will talk about that, and the White Tern Count, which Susan Scott and Rich Downs will talk about that. And I invite all of you to please join in with our citizen science projects. We're very excited about it. There will be a new websites for the terns and the Kolea towards the end of the year, so people can put their information into that. I think at this time it's time for our treasurer's report. John Harrison.
Good evening. I'm John Harrison, Treasurer of the Hawaii Audobon Society. Hawaii Audobon is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that has served as a source of information and advocacy for the community since 1939 to further the protection and conservation of Hawaii's native wildlife and their supporting ecosystem. My review of HAS finances considered balance sheet asset and liability changes from December 31st, 2019 through August of this year. Among the assets, both restricted and unrestricted bank account balances grew sufficiently to offset net reductions in book and other product inventories. On the liability side, HAS applied for and received a federal CARES Act loan of $3,700 in July, applicable to payroll, rent, and utilities. Under the federal law, this loan is forgivable, so this liability will likely resolve without further expenditure. For the 8 months covered by this review, balance sheet assets and liabilities increased by 3.2%, and total equity increased by 1.3%. Like most small businesses, HAS operates on a budget set by prior year profit and loss amounts. Comparing P&L figures at the end of August with prorated budget projections, net income as of August 31st exceeded the projected figure by almost 40%, while total expenditures surpassed projections by 9.6%. Our strong performance over the first 8 months of the year is surprising, given prevailing economic constraints brought on by COVID-19. Most HAS income is from tourism-related sales of our book, Hawaiiʻs Birds. With the collapse of tourism, book sales fell off, going to zero in April. However, starting just before the pandemic, the book publisher began making periodic reimbursements to HAS to reconcile past underpayment of consignment fees. As the pandemic progressed, these payments significantly bolstered our sales income. The most welcome surprise is that HAS received substantial donations during the first half of the year, exceeding our projected donation figure by over 60%. Comparing projected budget against actual expenditures, the Society generally met most category projections, accounting for intra-annual variation in timing of payments. An unplanned fence repair at the Freeman Seabird Preserve was the only significant expense not covered by the budget. We just received confirmation of arrival of the new 7th edition of Hawaiiʻs Birds in time for the upcoming holiday season. HAS looks forward to strong book sales as tourists return to the islands. Although product development for this new edition was costly, these expenditures are an eligible category for use of HAS restricted funds, which are more than adequate to cover production. Review of our financial statements has not uncovered any problematic discrepancies. Therefore, I conclude that fiscal oversight by the officers and board of directors has led to conservative management of society operations. And as a result, Hawaii Audobon Society is fiscally strong and stable. Many thanks for your continuing support.
Thank you, John. That was great. We now have some time to answer questions in the chat. And John, if you would be willing to turn your video back on, and then we have a few moments for questions, and I will get the program queued up.
Here's a question. Will the book be available at Bishop Museum? My understanding is that the Bishop Museum gift shop is one of the distributors of Hawaii Audobon publications. I do not know how soon they will be able to stock it. Alternatively, I'd suggest going to the Hawaii Audobon website, hawaiiaudobon.org, and there will be, you'll have the ability to order the book there. As mentioned previously, it will be a $15 cost for the book and about $3 for postage. So if you want the book the fastest way, that's probably the best way to get it.
Hi, I'm Pat Moriyasu, board member of the Hawaii Audobon Society. In 2018, Alice Roberts, Wendy Johnson, and I began revising a draft of the 7th edition of Hawaiiʻs Birds. In 2019, our team was joined by Susan Scott and Rich Downs. The book is organized by habitat, and in the 7th edition, the first chapter were reorganized into seabirds, shorebirds, and water birds. In the descriptions, a line for AKAs was added, common names by which a bird may be also known as. Common and scientific names were updated. Conservation and Hawaiiana information for some indigenous and endemic birds was added. Concern issues for some introduced and invasive birds were added. More photos of similar birds were added. A section on pelagic birding was added, and the sections on gulls and parrots were expanded. Sadly, some birds, such as the kauai'o'o, are now only listed in the Endemic Birds of Hawaii table, having gone extinct or probably extinct. Some of the team's greatest joy was going through the incredible photographs that we were honored to view and use in the book. It was difficult to choose, and we tried to use photos that would best help with field identification. Eric VanderWerf had the most photos in the book, followed by Tom Dove, Susan Scott, Tom Fake, and Ann Tanimoto-Johnson. We treasure each and every photo that came to us, whether it was used in this edition or not, and our deepest gratitude to all the contributors and photographers. The 7th edition is expected to be available for sale in the next few weeks. Earlier this month, we received an expedited shipment of 1 box, and complimentary books were promptly mailed out to the contributing photographers. I myself haven't seen the book yet. When you get your copy of the book, please take a moment to read the acknowledgments, to recognize those whose work we built upon, who created the first edition of Hawaii's Birds in 1967 through this 7th edition in 2020. We hope you enjoy Hawaii's Birds and use it often. Thank you for your support and for loving our wild birds.
Thank you, Pat. We're now ready to start the program. Tonight, we will hear from 4 of the fantastic photographers who contributed to the 7th edition of Hawaii's Birds.
And we'll start with photos that Ann Tanimoto-Johnson provided to us. Wonderful photos. I hope you'll enjoy them.
Aloha, I'm Ann Tanimoto-Johnson, and I'm honored to be able to present some of my photos at your annual meeting. First, I'd like to say what a privilege it is and how thankful I am for the opportunity to contribute some of my bird photos to Hawaii Audobon Society's Hawaii Birds 7th edition. Growing up in Hawaii, I was surrounded by nature and always had a passion for wildlife. I proceeded to follow my passion and got my master's degree from UH Hilo in the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science program, where I did my thesis on the vocal repertoire of the alala, our Hawaiian crow, pictured on the left. Since then, for the past 6 years, I've been working in my previous graduate advisor, Patrick Hart's Lohe Bioacoustics Lab, as the lab manager and research tech. This gives me amazing opportunities to work with our Hawaiian birds, especially in studying their behaviors and vocalizations. While I've loved taking nature photos since I was young, I decided to make that big purchase of getting a good camera and a large zoom lens as I started to do more field work. Since I'm on the petite side, and it is quite heavy to carry around my camera equipment with my monopod, as you can see me carrying it in the photo on the right, I only take it when I know I'll have opportunities to take photos out in the field or for weekend birding. So I've selected a few photos to give you a little backstory on them. The first is our I'iwi, which I'm honored made the cover of the Hawaii Birds 7th edition. This I'iwi photo is the essence of patience in bird photography. While at Hakalau National Wildlife Refuge, after we were done with field work for the day, I spotted some slightly lower blooming lehua on an ohia tree. So I grabbed my camera equipment and set out close by and ducked under another ohia tree. I waited and waited and waited. Finally, a little I'iwi hopped out to check out the blooms. An amakihi came at the same time, and I was so excited, 2 for 1. I'iwi, however, are known to be quite territorial of their trees, and sometimes we call them the bossy birds of the forest. And he promptly chased the amakihi out of the tree and didn't bother staying for his picture to be taken. Saddened, but still hopeful, I continued to wait. Until finally, a beautiful bright red I'iwi stayed for a little while, hopping around and taking nectar from the lehua. I was so excited. I was clicking away, and he looked up at me to see what all the weird clicking noises were about. It was at that moment that I finally was able to get this shot of him posing next to a lehua blossom. They say that patience is a virtue, and sometimes it's also the key to get the photo that you want. This next one is our alavi, or Hawaii creeper, as it's aptly named. It creeps and forages along the tree branches and stumps looking for arthropods to eat. At Hakalau, on a quite misty, rainy day, I was really bummed that I wouldn't be able to take my camera out to get any bird photos while I was in the field. So we were driving slowly along, and we stopped when we saw a tiny greenish yellow bird hopping around the ohia and koa. We thought at first that it was an amakihi, but it turned out to be an endangered alavi. I'm not sure what it is, but sometimes vehicles seem to make somewhat of an effective bird blind, as the little alavi continued hopping around and even stopped for a moment to pose for a few camera shots. This was one of those days of great car birding and picture taking at its best. This next photo is of our Hawaii akepa, which is somewhat known to love the very tip-tops of the ohia canopy. A lot of these bird photos that I get of them are tiny specks of them at the tops of the trees, or as very backlit silhouettes of them with a bright sky background. On one lucky day at Hakalau, we were just heading back on our way out from fieldwork for the day. We saw what at first glance looked like a low I'iwi hopping around the lehua blossoms. We went in for a closer look, and it turned out to be a beautiful male akepa. Low akepa are so hard to come by, and we got really excited. In our excitement, we started climbing up a small hill, and as we got a little bit closer to the tree he was in, I got so excited that I ended up in a slow fall backwards, tumbling camera equipment and all. I tried to quickly get up and just managed to get a few shots of him. He didn't seem to mind my clumsy commotion and just looked down to see what was going on. If birds judge, I bet he was thinking how crazy I looked with my big bazooka lens and camera falling all over the place. Besides my falling ordeal, what was extra memorable about seeing this guy was that he was also taking nectar from lehua blossoms, which isn't as common as our usual arthropod foraging through the ohia leaf buds. This next one is our oma'o. Seeing an oma'o to me is really special. Although these birds aren't as colorful as some of our other native birds, they are adorable and so fluffy. They are usually very shy, and it's hard to spot them in the forest. Usually you can hear them singing, and when you finally do spot them, it's when they're flying away. This oma'o, who I also photographed at Hakalau, was amazingly cooperative, in that he gave me a long minute or two of hopping around before he actually flew away. He was beautiful and kept singing and calling back and forth with another oma'o who was farther away. He would also do these, what we like to call oma'o wing flutters, where he would gently flutter his wings just slightly. Such a special sight, and I was really happy that I was able to get a few photos of him in the process. The next photo is of our pueo. Pueo aren't always easy to see. However, if you drive over Oatsada Road on the Big Island, just before dusk, sometimes you'll see them sitting on the old fence posts or hovering over the fields. Whenever we go to Kona for the day, we always come back over Oatsada Road, which is quite windy, but it doesn't have too much traffic and it's a really peaceful drive. My husband usually drives somewhat slowly as I sit ready, camera in hand. When we see a pueo, we safely stop on the side of the road so that I can try to get a photo of him. This photo is extra special because after many countless attempts, it was one of my first good pueo photos. This last photo is of a juvenile auku'u, our black-crowned night heron, who had been practicing and refining his fishing techniques. I remember the first time I saw an auku'u catch a fish. I was really young and I'd feed bread to the ducks, where back then I didn't realize wasn't very nutritious for them. I saw an auku'u grab a piece of bread and then walk over and place it carefully in front of him in the water. He sat and waited, resituating his bait. Then, all of a sudden, a big splash and commotion. He had caught a huge fish. It was so large that he waddled while carrying it and took it over to a nearby bush. He then put the fish down and rested his foot on it and waited until it stopped moving. Then he proceeded to swallow the whole thing. It was amazing. And since then, I've loved watching auku'u fish, bait or no bait. This photo was taken during a day when I was able to just sit and watch this juvenile auku'u practicing his fishing techniques, bending down and straightening out and catching tiny fish. He didn't notice, but after every catch I'd praise him saying, "Oh, good job, you caught another one." I love seeing them catch fish and could just sit around all day watching them. Thank you very much again for this amazing opportunity. My email is listed at the bottom if you have any questions, or you can check out our Lohe Lab website at UH Hilo for more information about ongoing research, as well as if you'd like to listen to some of our Hawaiian bird songs. On our website, we also have a link to our new Manu Minute segment, which will air weekly on our Hawaii Public Radio. I also listed my Instagram account on the bottom if you would like to check out more of my nature and bird photos. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ann.
We would like to introduce the next presenter, photographer Tom Fake. We thank Tom for his contributions to the 7th edition of Hawaii's Birds.
As a way of introduction, I've lived on Oahu for 43 years and worked for the National Park Service in Hawaii and the Pacific for 35. I was asked by several of my Audubon friends to submit photographs for the new 7th edition of Hawaii's Birds. So here are the first 16 that were selected. But after tonight's program, you'll have to purchase the book just to see them again. The first one is the red-billed tropic bird. The second, Japanese white-eye. The white-rumped shama. The white-rumped shama immature. The ruddy turnstone. The peregrine falcon and the northern harrier. The ring-necked pheasant. A northern cardinal female. The northern cardinal male. And 2 chickens. The mallard, male and female. Yellow-fronted canary. The black-crowned night heron. White-tailed tropic bird. Probably most of you know, but we have a great birding opportunity right here in Honolulu on the east-facing Kaiwi shoreline. For the last several years, I've been observing and photographing the tropical birds along the shore. On one fateful day in February 11th, 2019, I was able to observe and photograph all 3 species of tropic birds, the red-tailed, the white-tailed, and the red-billed, all on the same day. In 2020, I started to observe nesting behavior of the red-tailed tropic birds, the most prominent ones. They're located, the nesting is located in the rocks below the highway, and I decided to take photographs of the progress. The first observation of a chick in this year was on April 1st, 2020. I've been told by experts that the first chick is visible usually after 10 days from hatching. The photograph from April 23rd, 2020 shows the chick at about 30 days old and the first signs of pin feathers. Now on May 13th, almost 2 months old, the feathers are more defined and some of the markings near the eye are well defined. In all of my observations, I've not seen the feeding process until this day in May 2020 when the adult flew into the rock overlook. About 5 seconds and they were done. One article that I read is that the feeding takes place about every 17 hours. That's the adult on the right and the chick on the left. This June 3rd, 2020 photograph shows the immature bird starting to show new color and feathers on the back and head. And the eventual fledged day was a sad day for me. The last day I saw the immature bird, since the following day the nest was empty. A great day though for the future of the tropic birds. As I mentioned earlier, the red-billed tropic bird will be included in the 7th edition of Hawaii Birds. For the last 2 years, this species of tropic bird has been a regular on the East Oahu shoreline, usually arriving in January and leaving in March. The most prominent feature of the red-billed is the long white streamer tail. Looking at the 2 birds in flight, you can clearly see the identification differences. The red-tailed, of course, has a red streamer tail, and the red-billed has a white tail. Sometimes the red-billed can be seen landing on the rocky cliffs. They're definitely not good landers on the shoreline, and so it's kind of entertaining to watch them come in for a landing. This compilation shows a number of different flight patterns and flight characteristics of the red-billed. If you belong to ABA, then you probably recognize that the red-billed tropic bird was the 2019 ABA Bird of the Year. The front cover of Birding magazine featured a painting of the red-billed. This photograph on the right was taken by me in March of 2020, an almost duplicate, except for, of course, the tail configuration, But clearly, the bird is seen on the shoreline and especially near Lanai Overlook, at least for the last several years. Now here are some of the pictures that I've taken birding in Hawaii, and I'll let you go through, we'll let the slides just change on their own. One of the places I especially enjoy traveling to is the Pacific Northwest. So I'll let you enjoy some of the photos I've taken along the coast and in the areas of Portland, Oregon. One of the places that I traveled to while working for the National Park Service was the island of Saipan, a part of the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands. And there they have the Micronesian honeyeater. So these are some of the shots of the Micronesian honeyeater.
Thank you, Tom.
And now we're going to show you some photos that Susan Scott submitted for the 7th edition.
Hello, Hawaii Audubon Society members. This is Susan Scott speaking. I feel privileged to have been able to contribute to the 7th edition of the book Hawaiiʻs Birds. It's always been one of my favorite. I have many editions, and I am going to, in this slideshow, show you a few of the pictures that I contributed to the book and a couple stories about how I came to them. I learned in 1989 during my first trip to Turn Island that you do not need a telephoto lens to get good pictures of Hawaii's seabirds. Since then, I have had the great privilege of working as a volunteer at Turn Island for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a place that is just loaded with fabulous seabirds. And you can see here that they took ownership of the sign. This is a picture of a juvenile great frigate bird, one of our native species that nests on Turn Island, and one that is quite endearing to work with. Frigate birds catch most of their fish on their own. We always think of them as thieves because they do sometimes harass other birds to drop their fish, but they catch most of their fish on their own, and so they have to learn how to pick things up. So the juvenile frigate birds on Turn Island would play sticks with us. While we were working, we sometimes would pass a stick to a juvenile frigate bird that was sitting there watching us. It would take the stick and fly around with it for a while and then drop it and seem to be waiting for us to pick it up and give it back to them. It was sort of like playing catch and fetch with your dog. The juvenile frigates are always flying in squadrons like this around the island, and what they're looking for is something to pick up and practice. So this bird did a double take on a fluorescent light bulb that was washing in. There's a lot of trash at Turn Island. It's in the gyre. And so the bird spotted it, went back to try to get it. It was really a little too big for him, but he really persisted, trying, and finally got it by one end and dragged it down the beach, dropped it, turned around, did this all afternoon. This is another game that the juvenile frigate birds played. It wasn't much fun for the Kolea, but they would pick up shorebirds and carry them around and then drop them. So this frigate bird did actually get the Kolea off the ground. It was a little heavy, so it eventually dropped it in the surf and the Kolea flew away, to our great relief. The challenge of getting good pictures at Turn Island is backing off enough to keep the bird in focus while it's talking to your camera. And eventually everything lined up perfectly. The light was perfect, the bird was perfect, and this is one of the pictures we used in the book. The male frigate birds get a lot of attention because of the red pouch under their chin that they inflate to attract females. But I wanted to show you how beautiful their backs are in the sun. They have these beautiful green feathers. I got lucky one time on another island and got underneath a male displaying his inflated pouch, and you can see the blood vessels on the right and the feathers on the left. And this is the picture that we finally chose from Turn Island for the book. In 1985, Craig and I sailed our boat Honu from the east coast of the U.S. through Panama Canal to Hawaii. And as we were crossing the Pacific, these two birds landed on our aft deck. We didn't know what they were at the time. They are juvenile red-footed boobies, and I tried to feed them fresh water. I gave them breadcrumbs, all kinds of things, silly things, because they're seabirds. They eat fish only, and they do not drink fresh water. And later, when we learned more about what they were and more about these birds, we called this picture "Three Boobies on the Aft Deck." A couple years later, while I was working at Turn Island, I got to know red-footed boobies quite well and learned that this was the species that had landed on our boat. You can see how well named these birds are. And like other seabirds at Turn Island, they are not afraid of us. And all you need is a camera and some time to just stand there and watch them be their own beautiful selves. This is a mated pair, and the only difference you can tell during mating season from female is the blue beak is the female on the left, and the male is the greenish beak on the right. And these two also pose very sweetly for me. And as I said before, all you really need to do is back up enough to keep your camera in focus while the bird is poking at the lens. And this is that one perfect moment when everything's right. There's light and the sky and the bird. And this is one of the pictures we chose for the book, and it's also on the back cover. Love those bright red feet. Here's a brown version of
red-footed boobies. They come in white and brown. Most of the ones in Hawaii are white. Other parts of the world, they're this brown color. And this beauty showed up at Turn Island, one of the rare brown ones there, and also posed for a nice picture. We use this in the book also. I have been working at Midway Atoll since the early 1990s to count albatrosses, among other things. And this was my last trip there with Craig in the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, counting albatrosses. And one of the many beautiful things about Midway is that when you're there, you get to see Laysan ducks, one of the rarest ducks in North America. They were transplanted there from Laysan Island in 2004, 2005 to Midway, and you're supposed to stay away from these ducks because there's a legal distance because they're very endangered. There's several hundred here, but the big problem is they aren't afraid of us at all, and they love puddles, and it rains there a lot, so the roads that we walk on and ride our bikes on are often filled with puddles, which are filled with Laysan ducks. So here's a couple just hanging out in the puddle, acting like ducks, right in the middle of where a pretty heavy traffic area of where we walk and ride our bike. This little duck was in the storage unit where we keep our counting things, so it was really impossible to stay away from these ducks. Here's a couple that the people riding by didn't even see. They're standing there getting ready to jump in a puddle. Pretty easy to get pictures of the rarest duck in North America when they're standing up in a line like this, posing. This is a male and female. It's one of the pictures you can see the difference between them. The female on the upper left has sort of a pinkish beak, and the male has a greenish beak. And this is another picture we used in the book. And the last bird I was going to share with you is not Pacific golden plovers, but I was in Nome, Alaska in 2018 with Wendy Johnson. We went there to retrieve some satellite tags of some birds that he had tagged earlier, and so while we were looking for the birds with these bands on their legs, we crossed the Feather River. We stopped on the bridge and looked over the railing and saw these Arctic char, which was thrilling to me. I had never seen these fish before. They're salmon relatives, and they have a kind of antifreeze in their blood, so they can live in this really cold water. And while we were standing on the bridge looking at the fish below, an Arctic tern showed up. The Arctic terns migrate between the Arctic and Antarctic and sometimes stop in Hawaii. And so this was thrilling to watch this Arctic tern fishing, which was the first time I had seen this happening. And while we were standing there on that bridge, another Arctic tern landed on the railing right near us. And to our great surprise and delight, the fishing bird also landed on the rail with the fish in his mouth. Presumably it's the male offering female the fish in a courting gesture. And as he was trying to give it to her, they dropped it. And the fish was flopping around on the road below the railing. So the poor male is looking down, just about ready to jump down to get the fish. He jumps down just as the fish flops back into the river. So all this happened in just a few seconds while I was fortunately standing there with my camera, and just before the male took off to go fishing again, presumably, I got this picture, and this is the one we used in the book for the Arctic tern. It was quite a grand moment. Being in the right place at the right time is really what photography is all about. I will close by saying that being a volunteer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and also Hawaii Audubon Society has really been a highlight of my life, and I highly recommend it. It's sometimes really a lot of work and expensive. We pay our own way to get to some of these great places, but it's completely worth it. Thank you for letting me share some of my favorite stories with you.
Thank you, Susan.
We would now like to introduce our final photographer presentation of the evening. We'd like to thank photographer Eric VanderWerf for his contribution to Hawaii's 7th edition of Hawaiiʻs Birds.
My name is Eric VanderWerf. I work for Pacific Rim Conservation, and I've been a birder and ornithologist for the better part of my life. I'm happy to have my pictures used in the Hawaii Audubon Guide. I actually wrote most of the text for the previous version of the guide, and I think it's great that it's been updated. And I'm going to say a few words about some of my favorite photographs that are included in this latest version. The first bird photograph I want to talk about is of the black noddy. This is a really interesting bird. There actually are 2 subspecies that occur in Hawaii that look a little bit different. There's an endemic subspecies that's found in the main islands that has mostly orange feet and a grayish tail, and it nests in sea caves and cliffs, and it's found as far west as Lehua Islet. And then in the Northwest Islands, there's a different subspecies that's also found throughout most of the rest of the Pacific, and it has mostly dark feet, and it nests primarily in trees. So they have a different breeding ecology. They don't really come into contact very much, and some people think they should be called separate species, and that may happen in the near future. Okay, the next species I want to talk about is the Christmas shearwater, which to me is an underappreciated seabird that we have in Hawaii. They're pretty rare in the main islands. The only nesting colony is on Mokumanu Islet off the marine base in Kaneohe off Oahu. But in the Northwest Islands, they're fairly common, but they look a lot like a wedge-tailed shearwater. There's a dark phase of the wedge-tailed shearwater that is similar in color, a little bit lighter, not quite as chocolatey in color, and they have a longer tail. But they have this really cool courtship display where 2 birds will fly next to each other and give this, this beautiful, deep, soft call. And that's what these 2 birds are doing in that photograph. Okay. The next bird I want to talk about, maybe my favorite bird of all time. It's the Oahu alapaio. I've spent the last close to 30 years of my life studying this bird. And when I first started doing research on this bird, it wasn't really even known how many individuals there were. People thought maybe 200 or 300. So this is definitely an endangered bird. Turns out there are more than that, but they are still endangered. And the biggest threat to them is nest predation by non-native rats. Rats will climb up the tree that the nest is in, eat the eggs, the chicks, and even the incubating female if they can catch her. And this photograph here shows a female alapaio feeding 2 little nestlings. And I really like the way the sun is shining through the chick's mouth there and highlighting the orange color. And that orange color, that's kind of what the adults see too. The inside of the mouth of most baby birds is a bright color like that, and it creates a target for the parent to put the food in. So in this way, we can see what the parent is seeing too. The next bird I want to talk about is the miller bird, which is actually a species of warbler. It's an old world warbler. It's found on Nihoa Island, and it was recently translocated to Laysan Island to restore population there that had been wiped out. And that's been successful. Now they're thriving on both those islands. And the cool thing about this picture is that it's a little bit hard to see, but just in front of the miller bird, on top of that rock, is a spider. It's actually an endemic species of trapdoor spider called the Nihoa trapdoor spider. And it's endemic to Nihoa. And this bird found it and ate it, and I watched it pull all the legs off and then swallow the body. So that was pretty cool. The last bird I'm going to talk about is the Maui parrotbill, or the kiwikiu is the new Hawaiian name for it. This bird did not have a Hawaiian name, or at least not one that was known. There might have been one that was lost, and was given a new Hawaiian name in 2010. And I'll talk about the bottom photograph. It's a close-up. This is a bird that I'm actually holding in my hand. That's how I was able to get so close to it. This was part of a research project that I was helping out with, the Maui Forest Bird Recovery Project. We were misnetting and banding a number of forest bird species, so I got to hold this bird up close, which was an amazing experience. And in case you're wondering if that bill is really sharp and strong, yes, it is. They're very strong, and they can easily break the skin on a person's hand.
Thank you, Eric. Hawaii Audubon Society would like to give a sincere appreciation to all of the photographers who contributed their photos to the 7th edition of Hawaii's Birds. We would especially like to thank Ann, Tom, Susan, and Eric for joining us this evening and sharing their work.
So now that you've heard some of what the Hawaii Audubon Society has been doing over this past year, and a little bit about what we want to be doing next year, and you've seen some amazing photos of some of the birds that call Hawaii home, we're happy to now to present you with some opportunities for actually being involved with the conservation of a few of these species. My name is Rich Downs. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Hawaii Audubon Society. We're pleased to be able to provide opportunities for individuals to be actively involved in the conservation of a few of the species of seabirds that spend part of their lives in Hawaii. We'll now give you a quick introduction to 3 of these species and tell you how you can get involved. I'm also the coordinator of the White Tern Citizen Science project that's focused on monitoring the population of white terns that breed in the greater Honolulu-Waikiki area. The white tern, or mana-oku, has deep historical and cultural significance in Hawaii and is the official bird of the city of Honolulu. They are the only seabird in the world that lays their eggs in trees without building nests, and this is the only urban environment in the Pacific where they come ashore to breed. Understanding these and other fascinating behaviors of this unique urban seabird is one of the goals of our Citizen Science project. Sign up to become a White Tern Citizen Scientist and learn to use our app on your smartphones to locate trees the terns are known to use for breeding and to record your observations of their breeding behavior. Data you collect will be made available online to tree trimmers who maintain the trees across the city that the terns use for breeding, so they can do their work without disturbing nesting adults or their chicks. And as a volunteer with our White Tern Citizen Science project, you can help us put up and tend the blue ribbons you see around town that warn tree trimmers of the presence of nesting terns. The data you collect will also help us to better understand important aspects of white tern breeding behavior, such as what their breeding season looks like on Oahu. Data collected by our volunteers makes it possible for us to know which trees and nesting spots the terns use year after year. This information is critical to helping us reunite chicks that fall from the trees with their parents. You can help us rescue these fallen chicks by signing up for training in the tools and techniques we've developed to successfully reunite dozens of chicks with their parents. Learn more about this amazing urban seabird by visiting our webpage and sign up for training to become a White Tern Citizen Scientist.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Wendy Johnson. I'm a longtime volunteer at the Hawaii Audubon Society, both as a board member and as a coordinator of activities at the Freeman Seabird Preserve. The preserve is a beautiful, magical 1-acre property on the south shore of Oahu that was donated to us in 2007 by Mr. Freeman. It is the only nesting colony of wedge-tailed shearwaters on the urban south shore of Oahu. And the population has been monitored since 2009. We have good evidence that the protection and the care of the property has benefited the birds, because the count of active nests in 2009 was approximately 90 on the acre of property. And this year in July, approximately 250 active nests were counted. So we feel very happy about that. A large part of it is due to predator control measures, and also to the welcoming of clean burrows, additional burrow spaces. Some are man-made, some the birds dig themselves, and all of it's good. But from the time when volunteers can be most involved is the months from January through March, when the birds are at sea. At that time, we do what's called habitat restoration. And it involves a lot of different components. Some of it is native plant care. We have many people very knowledgeable about Hawaiian coastal plants. And we do weeding, of course, of invasive species. We do some tree trimming. We do burrow maintenance, and we have opportunities for whale watching at the same time, as well as wonderful sharing of information and experiences amongst the volunteers. The volunteers are also regularly invited to participate in some of the science, the nest and chick counts. We also have school groups that visit the preserve and different volunteer groups. We've had scouting groups, and so we're welcoming groups as well as individuals. And so the field trips and work parties are part of this process. And we also recommend highly the lesson plans on the Freeman Seabird Preserve website. We just had a group of high school students who are participating in that lesson plan through their teachers initiative, and they were able to come out and see the young chicks on the site. And it was really rewarding to see their reaction and hear their millions of questions, because there's so many mysteries involved with seabird lifestyles and so much to learn from them. So hope to see you out there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Scott, and since the early 1990s, I've been writing about Hawaii's Pacific golden lovers, the Kolea, and people have been asking questions about whether the population is increasing or decreasing, and we don't know because we've never had a formal count of these birds in the Hawaiian Islands. They spend the winters here and the summers in Alaska. So if you can help us count, please go to koleacount.org and scroll down and find the site that has sign up locations where we're asking people to count 3 times between December 1st and March 31st. And you can report your birds on that site. There's report tabs. And hopefully we will find out at the end of this season, when they leave in April, whether, what kind of numbers we get. So thank you for helping us help these birds. They really need the help, and we are all happy to help them because we like them. They're in our yards. They're one of Hawaii's favorite native birds.
Thank you, everyone. Linda, do you have a few words to close our meeting?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for attending this very first virtual meeting. We did our very best to make it entertaining in these very restricted conditions, and we're glad you could be with us. And we hope next year to see you all in person, and please stay safe.